Well, another person that we've spoken about as a positive influence is Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson. This story is not necessarily about Tucker Carlson, but it's about something that Tucker Carlson said. And there's a report, like Tim Pool from Timcast. He did a report on this, and links below, as always, where they were talking about Tucker Carlson predicts that there's going to be a hot war with Russia to defeat Trump in election. Now, there's actually a bunch of stuff going on at the moment. There's a bunch of other videos going around about why there's going to be a nuclear war and stuff like that right now with Russia, and the reasons why yes and no. I think that there's two kind of probably three desperate leader stories out of this. Is first of all and I don't think this is true, but like it could be argued, is this just Tucker Carlson being desperate to try to get views, making some, crazy accusations? No, I don't think so. I think that, there's a lot of evidence. A lot of people are saying this. Number two is, as this report says, they say that this is the Democrats trying to get this hot war to happen so that Trump will be, or all the rules will be changed in the election and Trump will be defeated in the election. Now that sounds desperate leadership for me. And then the third really is, leaders resorting to a hot war, like with nuclear bombs and all that sort of stuff. Russia and America and all the other countries that are involved in this. That sounds desperate to me. Dr. Rod, this all seems pretty doom and gloom. What should we learn from this?
Wow. Well, America is in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. There's just no doubt about that in terms of its politics. Democracy has been absolutely trashed in the United States. And I say that as someone who doesn't live there, of course, but
but your family that live there, so you can say.
I do have family who live there, and I really trust that they won't be touched by a lot of this stuff that's going on. But look, I agree with you. I think Tucker Carlson is sincere in what he said. It is well known, and he's been quite open about this. He disagrees with American support for Ukraine, so he's actually been against the war in the first place. He doesn't believe that the United States should be pumping billions and billions of dollars into the war in the first place. So I found it interesting that he made this comment, and I do think he's quite sincere about it. And he's certainly got circumstantial evidence from what's been going on the Democratic side of federal politics to substantiate what he is saying. In all likelihood, the reason why Donald Trump has been indicted in those 4 different jurisdictions is because the Democrats actually believed that this would prompt the Democratic Party to make him their nominee for president, but they also believe that there is no way that the general population would actually vote him in. However, things have turned out to be a little bit different if the polls are to be believed. He's been able to raise a lot of money on the back of the indictment, millions and millions of dollars.
Every time there's a new announcement, his
funding
goes up.
That's right. The last time he was indicted, he raised something like $7.2 million. It's certainly consolidated his position as the likely nominee, but recent polls are showing that he's likely actually to defeat Joe Biden. Now, I think that has made the Democratic Party very, very desperate. And I think also another cause of their desperation, and perhaps one of the reasons behind the changing attitudes on the part of the ordinary voter, is that it is as plain as the nose on your face that his indictments are politically driven. Absolutely. Now, in a recent interview, Donald Trump said he would send people to jail. Now, I would have rather hoped he would have said, I'm going to stop this nonsense. We haven't used the law as a weapon of war politically in the past, and I'm going to stop it It has to stop here. And for the good of America, it should stop here. But the idea that somebody might now decide, well, okay, we actually need a war somewhere. That there's been talk, of course, about bringing back in COVID restrictions, and now, Tucker Carlson has raised the issue of what he calls a hot war. I think there is some credibility in it. I hope it doesn't happen. I think the American people would be dead against it. It would be
you said there's some credibility. In the fact that there's going to be a hot war, or credibility in the fact that it's a Democrat doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely, I think there is. Because they're desperate to keep the Bidens out of jail. That's what it amounts to.
Yeah.
And honestly, there is now so much evidence mounting against the Biden family.
Yeah.
On it, really. They've got much more evidence against them than Donald Trump ever had. Donald Trump's biggest crime really was that he lacked wisdom. And I stand by that comment. I've made it on this podcast before. I think he lacks wisdom. But I've also said on this podcast before, and I stand by that comment, he has unfinished business and he needs to have the opportunity to finish that business. He needs another term in which to do that. And by that business, I mean to finish all the good things he started while in office. So, despite his lack of wisdom, I think he did a lot of really good things for America. He did a lot of really good things internationally. And I do think he has unfinished business and should have the opportunity to do so. I do think the Democrats are becoming desperate. They can't replace Joe Biden with the vice president because she's even less popular than he is. And there's no evidence that she's committed any crime. She's just not up to the job, pure and simple. She's not competent for a job like that. I would hope that there won't be a hot war. If I was a betting person, I would actually say no, because I think it would become patently obvious to those in decision-making positions within the Democratic Party that the American people simply would not stand for it. There just isn't the heart in America. They've lost confidence in their political system. I think they're rapidly losing confidence in the Democrats. I just don't think they would support a hot war. They just wouldn't do it. It would be extremely risky because allied with Russia, you would have China and Iran in particular. I think it's also significant that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have been invited to join the BRICS initiative on their currency. So basically everybody that America has upset during the Biden presidency is kind of banding together, and they'll form a very significant opposing force, I think, to the Americans. It's a very sad state of affairs. I hope it doesn't happen. I really hope, for the sake of American democracy, that they can pull back from weaponizing the law to score political points. It's a dreadful, dreadful development. I was very sad to hear that President Trump apparently is going to continue with it as kind of payback. I think it would be a statesman-like thing for him to say, you know what, this is bad for our country. We're going to stop it.
It doesn't seem like that's in his character, though.
Well, you never know, but he's very pugnacious.
Yeah.
Look, I think the biggest damage that President Trump did while he was president was to really make America more isolationist. I think he had an isolationist trade policy. And really the world has only enjoyed the benefits of trade in a major way since 1945. And that's because the American Navy was keeping the trading routes, the sea routes open. And they were doing that because of the Cold War. With the end of the Cold War, their reason for maintaining naval presence on the oceans and protecting trade routes has kind of become much less of a force. It may be increasing now, but the whole world has benefited from the supremacy of the United States Navy on the high seas, and we're seeing that diminish in a big way now. So I see a lot of economic dangers here as well.
So moving on from the political desperation, because that's ridiculous, and hopefully I think there's wisdom in what you're saying. I mean, I know there's wisdom in what you're saying, that it needs someone to stand up and stop it. So in desperate times, it needs a leader to just stand up and stop. But that's it. Just draw the line in the sand. And I think that's a good point. The next desperate thing that I kind of wanted to talk about with this was the desperation of the actual war itself. And there was another video that I was actually watching. I didn't put the link in here, Yash. Remind me to put remind me to put the link below for the rebroadcast. There was another article that Tim Pool also responded to, who actually spoke about the actual Cold War itself, and sorry, not Cold War, the hot war that's going to be happening, and the different ways in which it could possibly be started. You know, like there could be a fake attack, and then there's retaliation, all this other stuff. It does seem like there's just a lot of desperation at that war level, right? But one thing he mentioned is, he said the biggest threat of the nuclear weapons is actually just the threat. Actually using them has no significant, impact. Like it's not like you're going to take out major infrastructure that's going to damage a nation or whatever. And just, he went out, link it below. Like it was a great great response. But what he was saying is, because it was in response, apparently there's someone on Russian TV that went on and just said, like, we're gonna make we're gonna shoot nuclear weapons at America. We're not going to have this battle in Europe. We're going to take this to US soil. And he said he doesn't see that there's ever going to, there's no reason for the actual firing of it, because all of this seems to be just, it's powerful, the fact that everyone's threatening, but as soon as they release them, that's it. Like it's done then. Like what's going to happen, and it's going to be retaliation, but why are they going to retaliate or whatever? What's your take on I suppose for leaders, should we be concerned that there's going to be a World War III? Is there going to be a hot war? Is there going to be nuclear weapons? What should we as leaders know about this and be prepared for this?
Okay, the first thing to say is it's absolutely impossible to put a probability on it. Mm-hmm. In circumstances like this, you can't put a probability. And the main reason is in order to be able to put a probability on something, you need to have lots of repetitions of it. It's like tossing a coin. You've got to do it a lot of times to figure out that you've got 50% chance of getting a head, 50% chance of getting a tail. And you've got to toss that coin a lot of times to see that those percentages work out. So there's no point really in trying to put a probability. You can get a subjective probability, and I'm not expert enough on war to be able to do that. But what I would say is, yes, I guess it is a possibility. But I think the arguments against it are quite powerful because, one, the American people won't stomach it. And two, the European nations are very half-hearted about the whole thing anyway. Mm-hmm. Other than the UK, the other European nations have really not provided Ukraine with much that is useful, that's for sure. Yeah. Even Australia hasn't. The most useful thing we provided for them was some I think Bushmaster vehicles. Our most recent gift is you might as well be gifting to a thrift shop or an op shop. It's basically garbage that the Australian Army doesn't want to use anymore or can't use.
It was our leftovers, was it?
Absolutely. We've got a fairly prominent foreign affairs writer by the name of Greg Sheridan here in Australia, who's been quite scathing about the Australian government's efforts. So there's a lot of tokenism going on here. Most countries don't have a lot of heart for the war. I'd be shocked if it was America that started a hot war, because I just don't think they're not going to find support within the NATO countries, and they won't find support within their own population.
Even if, like, apparently there's some ruling within, I think it's the NATO or so UN or something like that, that if Russia fires a nuclear weapon, that means that all of the nations
that
in the
is
group,
part of the NATO agreement.
To.
They are obliged to under the NATO treaty. It wouldn't surprise me if some drag their feet, put it that way.
Yeah.
Because they're in Europe. They don't want a hot war on their doorstep.
No.
I really don't think they do. So, look, if I had to make predictions, I would say the Democratic Party will cut the Bidens loose before they start a war. But who knows? Because as I said, you can't put a statistical probability on this. It can only be some sort of subjective feeling. And frankly, I'm not expert enough. I don't know enough. But if someone asked me, I'd have to say there is a possibility. But I think at the end of the day, there just wouldn't be the support for it either within those European countries or within the American population. But Tucker Carlson obviously has a different view, and he's welcome to it. And you raised the issue, I think, earlier as to whether or not he was contriving all this just to drive his numbers up. I don't think he has to.
No.
I just don't think he has to.
I agree.
And I do think he's an honourable person anyway. Based on, I've watched him off and on for a long period of time now. I think he's an honourable person. I don't know him personally, but I'm allowed to have an opinion, aren't I? And that's my opinion.
Yeah, he seems. You're right. I agree. I threw that out there as a random, but he doesn't seem to be someone that does clickbait, I suppose.
No, he doesn't need to, does he? He just doesn't need to. I mean, look at how many people watched him on his very first podcast on the then Twitter, now X. He doesn't really need to. He's got a big following, which he's built up over quite a long period of time. But just in terms of leaders, my reaction ultimately is I pray for righteousness in the United States, that the United States would be rid of the evil that is afoot, which is undermining democracy in that nation, and that the nations of the world would just hold back and not allow themselves to become engaged in a hot war. Having said that, and I know that the support for Ukraine is unpopular among some Christians, and they usually base their support for Russia or their lack of support for Ukraine on two bases. One, Ukraine is one of the most corrupt nations in the world, and yes, that's true. So is Russia. And there are many other nations that don't have anything to be proud of either. If you have a look at Transparency International's ranking on the basis of corruption. And the other thing is history, that the Ukraine was part of Russia historically. Now, I actually don't think either carries much weight. What's at stake here is the fact that one country invaded another, which at the time was established as a nation with borders that were recognised generally. So who was in the wrong? I think Russia was in the wrong, and I would like to see Ukraine win the war. But I don't think it can, with only the United States doing the really heavy lifting in terms of supplies to the Ukrainians. Other than the United Kingdom, really, other countries haven't really done their bit. That's my view. But as a Christian leader, I think the most important thing I can do is pray and be prepared to share my view. I've got people in my own church who do not agree that the Ukraine has actually been hardly done by, and their view is that Russia had every right to invade, based primarily on the corruption argument, but more importantly on the history argument.
Yeah.
We've got to disagree. We've got to have the courage to disagree and to put our point forward as leaders. We just can't shrink back.
Yeah.
But honestly, the most important thing we can do is to pray for peace in that situation.
Yeah.
Pray for justice.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have a view on it because there are so many sides to it. Like initially I I kind of disagree. I felt that Russia did the wrong thing. You know, trying to still like whatever, like so much detail, like
Yeah,
in that
but
little
it's
island
right, Craig. You've got
but
every
like,
right to hold that position, absolutely. And I would
yeah,
defend your right to do it. I don't happen to agree with you, but you have the right to hold that opinion. And as long as you can present to me something, like a coherent argument, I'm happy for us to have our differences. And that's how we should live. But
yeah,
the world doesn't seem to want to live that way anymore.
no, but like I said, actually, I don't have a view because I don't understand it. Like I've kind of, I'll be honest, I've kind of ignored it. I'm not big, like I'm not interested in it, not, but I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that. So I can see both sides, but like you said, ultimately, I just want peace there. Like, yeah, like let's just all stop this and let's stop this silliness and go have lunch. Like, but look, desperate times, desperate measures, and the thing is with this story, there's so much desperation politically, desperation as far as like militarily. I don't even know if that's a word, but with the war, there's I just I kind of I kind of feel like it's at a point where, what's the right way to say this? Where everyone's drawn their gun and everyone's threatening, and now it's like someone's got to pull a trigger now. That's kind of like, although there's lots of triggers being pulled and there's lots of there is stuff going on, but it kind of feels like that. As like everyone's. It feels like when two drunk guys bump into each other in a bar and they're both like, "Gonna take me on? What are you gonna do? Step out of my way. Come on, I'll take you on." But neither of them really fired. They may push each other a little bit, but they're like, oh, just threatening and yeah. Me, by many years as a bouncer in a nightclub, I've seen many of those, and it just. But where do you stop? Like that's the thing. Like
Yeah.
you've drawn your gun, so to speak, and it's now it just seems like everyone's kind of like, now what do we do?
Well, it's we've got to think about. There's about, I think, pretty close to 200,000 people dead in this war,
Yeah.
and they're not all soldiers.
No.
A lot of civilians. So, we need to try and do what we can to bring about some peace there, because we're talking here about 200,000 people dead. That should weigh very heavily on people who want to use this war for political purposes.
Yeah. It just doesn't, though. It's just they're so caught up in their political, gain that they're trying to achieve.
Well, there's something wrong when politics becomes the main thing, and that's all about power. And there's something about human beings. When we're not solidly a follower of Jesus Christ, we tend to want to find identity in power. And that undoes a lot of people ultimately, but it damages a lot of people in the meantime. And I think we're seeing that in American politics. We're seeing that in the war in Ukraine. And I think, it might sound very naive, but I think the world desperately needs to get back to Jesus. We need Jesus followers. People who are prepared to say, look, my identity is not determined by the power that I have through a political process or through some business process. My identity comes because I am a follower of Jesus, and my oneness with him and my oneness with other Christians, that's from which that's where I derive my identity. It's a kind of a sickness, if you like, a sin to derive your identity from power, fame, money, any of these things, because it will always take you down the route of preventing someone to flourish, right?
Yes.
And we should be all about human flourishing.
Everyone flourishes.
Everyone.
Like shalom.
Absolutely.
That's that word
it.
of like
Absolutely.
Shalom is everyone
Absolutely.
flourishing. Everyone flourishing in all areas. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube with Leadership podcast. If you've liked that, give it a thumbs up. If you've got any thoughts of how it challenged or helped your leadership, put a comment below. And we'd be honored if you would consider subscribing for more leadership content. Also, make sure you check out the playlist for more episodes like this.